All right, welcome back. This is newspaper review segment of the BDTV Breakfast Show, where we explore top headlines on the front page of our dailies. My name is Deborah Eze, and joining me in the studio, of course, for more insights this morning is
Onyeka Valentine.
I want you to say that the way you usually say it.
Okay, so Onyeka Valentine.
Okay. And we also have hello, Mr. Joshua Bassi. Good morning.
Right.
It's indeed a raining morning. Yes.
And by the way, with the rain came, a bit of accident around Ikoyi area where a crane fell on moving vehicles. And it's the scene right now. I'm sure press people out there taking pictures and
so sad. I'm sure our guys are actually on ground to cover it also. So let's go straight to the dailies, and we're going to be starting with our sister company, which is the BusinessDay newspaper. And the big story on the BusinessDay this morning reads, "From scarcity to surplus, fixing Nigeria's food crisis." And under that, we have insecurity, climate change push Nigeria closer to food emergency. Right. Valentine sounds like he has a lot to say about this.
Right? I come with cap, but not cap in hand.
Okay.
I will explain what I mean. When I say cap, I mean to say, look, this is a no-brainer. Mr. Joshua, you might agree with me or not. It's a no-brainer because if you look at it, we're talking about insecurity that might be causing, have food, issues on food
emergency
and affect climate change. How does that even correlate? Let's be honest. So if we're talking about insecurity, which has always been a big issue, it's no longer news, or would we say it's now a natural disaster? No, it's human disaster, right? And so how does that affect climate change? Are you saying that the farmers are not going out to go and farm, and so because of that, the topography of the land doesn't allow flow to flow properly, or what? So I don't see how that flows through. But however, to draw meaning from that, I will say this. Most definitely, if we get our acts together, we'll be able to see very clearly that those areas that we consider as food baskets of the nation, we should have more security personnel there than have them attached to politicians unnecessarily. This way, we'll not worry about farmers or whatever it is, clashes, and then worry about the issue of that climate change thing. Because if the farmers are consistent, right, maybe we'll not have issues with, flood washing away the land, washing away some certain areas, and then causing food insecurity. That's just my take.
What's your take, Mr. Josh?
But it's basically it's quite clear what the story is talking about. There's been so much insecurity almost all parts of the state, really. But if you look at the areas that we consider the food basket of the nation, like the middle
Benue,
Benue in particular, Taraba, all those areas, that's where we have a lot of food, production, taking place.
Right.
And because of the high level of insecurity around those areas, farmers can't go to farm anymore. In some places, farmers have to pay the bandits to be able to access their farm. And in some cases, when they go to their farm, when they harvest, they have to give part of what it is they have harvested to the bandit to be able to even take the remaining. So basically, this is expected. I mean, it's a no-brainer actually. This is expected. When farmers cannot access their farm, where they cannot go, do the farm work, definitely nobody wants to die. And so if you go to farm and you are not sure that you will come back alive, why should you go?
Right.
Why should
and
you go?
it actually says here in the story,
and farm, of course, then we can produce.
It actually says that this is like the worst food crisis Nigeria has experienced.
So far, according to the story, this year alone we have lost like 60% of our food production to this issue of insecurity. And of course, there's a part of it, climate change. And of course, you know that with climate change, you can no longer actually predict the way, whether rain, whether sun. And of course, there's also this push, what do you call this one now?
Planting season?
Yeah, it's affecting
erosion.
Planting season.
Yeah.
Of course, so And of course, so this is where the case of irrigation also come in anyway.
That's
all
what I was heading
of those
to.
issues, all of those
Irrigation.
issues. And I think, like Valentine said, government should pay closer attention to areas that we consider the food basket of the nation, because we must be able to feed ourselves as a nation.
Okay.
If we can't feed ourselves as a nation, then
we've lost it.
Really.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at
all the food that we eat.
All right, let's take a look at another story on the Business Day. It says Dangote's full transition to local crude seen saving FX, and the writer there said incentivizing upstream investments.
Take it again.
Dangote's full transition to local crude seen saving FX.
No, basically what the story is talking about.
The answer is already in that caption.
That's
That's what I said, take it again.
Okay.
So Dangote is hoping to, before the end of this 2025, going forward, that hopefully that he will be able to get his crude supply to his 650,000 barrel per day refinery locally. You know, currently does a lot of importation of crude to be able to refine, and so if it would save a lot of forex really if we doesn't have to import crude to be able to refine, and that will also I say that's a very positive one for us as a nation and as a people, as consumers of the petroleum product, because if we have to source crude locally to refine, especially by Dangote, it means that there will be some level of reduction, I hope so, in the price of how we buy these things at the filling station, because the cost of a fleet will be taken out.
Will be lesser. Lesser. That's what I said when I said take it again. You could see that. Look, what's going on right now in the Middle East? Believe it or not. Remember, Dangote imports crude oil also, which again brings me to the question: why import crude oil when we already have here?
Yeah.
So he's being sabotaged, and he knows that for his refinery to work and work in an optimized way, he will need to follow through. Now, importing crude oil in a global market that's already shaking. Don't forget, we just came out of Iran and Israel, which the peace talk and peace agreement is still on shaky grounds.
Yeah.
So that affects his ability to get crude oil on a quantum basis. So if you look at it, it will spill over to the fact that, you know, the transition of local crude scene obviously will affect most definitely.
Yeah.
Because now,
saving forex, basically.
Most definitely. So now if you look at it, the local, put it this way now, the local transcend for him to get oil from is already being stifled.
Yeah, but the point actually.
So he's going to spend more money
locally. We are not even producing, because there've been this deal that the NNPC has been this practice of
selling directly
to him
in advance, collecting money, loan, actually taking loan and using crude as
collateral,
something like
barter. So we take the loan and then we use crude. So at the end of the day, what we produce locally, I'm talking about crude now, it's not even enough for us to be able to feed our own local refineries, because we have to actually give them to those that we borrow the loan from. And so to a very large extent, that affect the quantity that's left that can then be given to local refineries like Dangote and even the rest of them. For a very long time, you recall that there was this Naira for crude deal, but NNPC, which was actually again renewed. But the point is that we don't even have enough crude to supply local refineries. I
would want to beg to differ.
No,
we actually have enough crude. The problem we have is, so in the Niger Delta, the interest there is so much that 80% of our crude oil, put this way, let's be realistic, 60% of our crude oil that is being extracted from the land is lost due to a lot of illegal bunkering going on.
Vandalization.
That's going on. It
affects also.
That affects the volume that we are able to. But the point still remains. The point remains that there's this swap deal that NNPC, is that practice. That ensures that what they get is in advance.
Okay. All right. Because we don't have so much time, let's just take the last story on the Business Day. It said FAC windfall slows state borrowing spree. FAAC windfall slows state borrowing spree. Now the question is, will Nigerian borrowing system ever slow down?
There's a story we took.
Because-
There's a story he took.
Yeah.
We spoke about. Was it last week or this week? I think so. Or during newspaper review, talking about FAC and how well are they actually pulling through when it comes to funds.
Yeah.
Look, this allocation of funds, right, to states using our natural resources.
Yeah.
If you ask me, again, it might not work, but if it will work, you will realize that most states that are not bringing revenue will begin to tap down into their local content and begin to be more productive.
Right.
Because we're spending so much money giving some certain states that I will cause more burden to us. There's some certain states there in the north. I don't want to call their names, they know themselves. The ones who are actually harboring these bandits, they're not producing anything to the country.
No, it's not only staying in the north, there are also states in
In the
south.
south,
that are
yeah.
Practically not.
And so-
even including oil producing states, they
Yeah.
are not even able to even manage what
How many
But
states in
the state
Nigeria
like River
actually?
State,
Okay.
I mean, they are like one of the predominant, oil producing states. I think they're not doing badly. I'm not from River State, so I'm not making a case for them,
Okay.
right? But they're not doing badly. But when you look at a state like what I say, I don't want to say. Okay, let's just say a state like Kano, for instance, right? Look at it closely. We used to know them back in the days as a trade route, state, but only recently we heard there's some minerals that are in Kano. So the big question is this: can we begin to say those minerals now begin to add money and fundings and add more value to the country? Let us spread this wealth evenly and not rely on a particular area to bring crude oil, and then FAC comes, okay, let us spread the money and give it to different states.
Right.
It's okay.
It might sound like a
Do
no-brainer.
you agree?
Yeah, it's okay, that will be fine.
That will be fine.
But the story basically is actually talking about the fact that because since the removal of fuel subsidy,
Right.
we've seen increased revenue allocation to states.
Because the money being used properly.
But that's another.
Is the money being used properly? It runs into trillions of naira.
Yeah. So maybe because of the larger amount of money the states are receiving, maybe they are seeing less need for them to borrow.
Okay.
I think that's
All
what
right.
it's
So
about.
let
agree with you
me
with that
just hold it there. Then we now move to the Punch newspaper, and the big story on the Punch says Mark cautions Atiku Obi as federal government slams coalition chiefs.
There we go again.
I'll take that again. Mark cautions Atiku Obi as federal government slams coalition chiefs.
Okay, so,
Very interesting.
Yeah. In 2023,
Mm-hmm.
2023, you recall that Obi. Let's start from 2029.
Okay.
Obi was vice presidential candidate to Atiku in 2019.
Yeah.
2019 election, and then they made a good showing actually. In 2023, the splits. Obi went to the Labour Party. Atiku were, of course, retained his PDP, and each of them, Obi scored about 6.1 million votes in 2023. Atiku scored about 6.9 million votes, and if you put that together, that was like 12 point something million votes. Whereas Tinubu, who actually won that election, scored 8 million plus. You understand? So if you put the vote of Obi and Atiku together, you know that, of course, they could clearly, if they were together like they were in 2019, obviously they could have beaten the sitting president in 2023. And so what David Mark is actually saying in the light of the coalition that they're trying to form now under ADC. So David Mark, who is part of that coalition, is actually telling, look, this time around, if you have to learn lesson from what happened in 2023, and so if you want to go solo, you might run into the same crisis, the same problem that you had in 2023. So you're actually telling them to begin to, because Obi has, of course,
declared
told the world that he's not going to be vice president to anybody. And of course, then there's people believe that whatever it is, that Atiku will still want to contest. You understand? So David Mark, who is part of them in this coalition, is simply just telling them, look, if you want to make any good showing, if you truly want to wrestle power from the sitting president, who is a dynamic politician, you don't have to go solo the way you went in 2023. So close rank. Maybe it's time to make that sacrifice of, doing away with your presidential ambition. It's either it is Obi
or it is Atiku.
So if you go different ways, of course, just make sure that.
Vice, let me ask you: do you see that happening?
So I mean, I want to
in 5 minutes.
In 1 minute, in fact.
Okay.
I want to toe his line.
Yeah.
Right. Look, if Atiku stands alone, he's definitely going to fail woefully.
Okay.
If Obi stands alone, look, we might end up seeing a reenactment of what happened. Maybe they will steal his mandate, or probably whatever it is like they allegedly said it happened. But the question is this: if we have this coalition, according to David Mark, if they have, we're not politicians, so let's stay on the fence. If they have that coalition, which they come together, ADC, the big question is this: will they be able to pull the minds of Nigerians towards their angle so that something can come out of it and it can unseat the ruling party? That's a big question. But there's something else we're not seeing here. Atiku is a man of ego. Forget about it. Will he stand down and allow them to shine? I don't think so. He still has some fight in him.
All right, we'll get to know.
That's why the national discussion.
Right. Now let's move to the Vanguard.
You have to,
All right, let's move. But there's nothing wrong in being ambitious. I wouldn't fault Atiku for it. There's nothing wrong in it.
This is what they say. They say, look, trust but verify. Be ambitious and be sensible.
Well, I've been vice president.
He's a serial contender, but he has never won.
Really.
So if you then realize that
it's time for me to step down.
Why not just
and
back someone you think
exactly. And this is that Nigerians do. If I cannot be allowed to go through the door,
no one would go through the door.
That's so
let's now move to the Vanguard. The Vanguard, the front page of the Vanguard, the big story says federal government battles IMF over report on inflation, poverty. And the writer to the story says worries that such statements can turn the people against the government, and notes body adversary messages often in conflict with its lending stance. Do you see anything wrong in what the IMF actually said in their report? Are we not battling inflation and poverty?
In 20 seconds, look, simple as this. I would say, the day Nigeria wakes up and get off the strong and strangling hold of IMF, the day Africa will be better. I don't think you got it.
I know.
The day Nigeria wakes up and decide to get off the stranglehold of IMF, the day Africa will be better. Leave that.
Okay, Mr. Josh.
But for me, I think I also share the sentiment that we should not always, allow the IMF to dictate to us, because what we've seen so far in Africa is that IMF and World Bank tend to detect.
They're in cahoots. They know what they're doing.
This, go do this one and do this one and all of that. Increase, devalue your currency.
That's what happens.
So, but I think this time around, I'm surprised that the FG is reacting this way. They've been following IMF all along. So why
are they worried about what it will do to the people?
Because IMF is telling them the truth.
Yeah.
Coming out to
there's something I'm not saying. Nigeria now is not dancing within the framework and the rhythm of BRICS. Meaning to say that, in case you're not aware, Donald Trump has now said, look, all nations that are attached with BRICS will receive a 10% tariff slam. And that obviously will have IMF even speak even louder.
But the point actually I was trying to make actually, Debbie, is that I have read that report and I don't see anything IMF has said in that report that is not happening right now.
They're in the gray area.
There's not. We're talking of inflation. They're talking of poverty, high level of poverty among the citizens. They're talking about the fact that citizens cannot feed, high cost of food. All of that is what the IMF has said. So what's the
this is the trick.
The federal government is making.
This is the trick. The trick is create what we call stifle. Right, in the economy, present it to the people and tell them, because we are a world body, if you don't go and dance within our ambience. The tendency that you're going to face problems. This way, we have no choice but to come back and borrow again from them.
They know we have no choice, actually.
Really. They've actually, if you read that report, they've actually commended some of the reforms. And that's saying that, that's saying that the benefits of these reforms are too slow in coming, and that the people are dying of poverty.
Okay.
The
Now,
people
speaking about poverty,
So
let
that's
me
what they've
hold your thoughts there. Let's look at the cartoon of today.
Okay.
Very interesting. You know, whenever you all sit here and analyze the cartoon of the day, I'm always in awe.
So this cartoon,
we have a very thick woman. I like to call them thick woman, representing the state government, and she has a feeding bottle to her mouth that represents the federal government allocation, and to her back is a very lean baby that stands as the local government. So we can see the state government is feeding off the federal allocation, and the local government has nothing.
Believe it or not, it is self-explanatory, but there's something we're not seeing.
Okay.
Undertone, right? If I'm going to add an extra character to that, I will now say the chair that the federal allocation is sipping into the state government that is sitting on the chair and backing the local government. I will now write the masses on that chair. What does that mean? In other words, the masses
You're sitting on us.
God bless you.
Comfortably.
but you see, this story again speaks. You see, there was a Supreme Court judgment that said, look, let federal allocation to local government go directly to the local government and no longer pass.
Well, I must say,
Debbie, unfortunately, that judgment up till now has not been implemented.
That's the problem we have.
Supreme Court judgment, as you speak,
has not been implemented.
Slow judgment is what keeps us where we are.
I know of a local government chairman in my state who was a commissioner in the cabinet of state. It was a commissioner, in the state cabinet. And then because of this federal allocation that was coming to the local government,
development has happened.
He resigned as a commissioner
and became a local government.
As a local government. And he won. He's a local government chairman now.
To enjoy.
He was hoping that this federal allocation
will get to him.
Because of course there was a pronouncement by the Supreme Court. But the question is, how come almost 8 months after that? It was last year, right? It was last year. How come up to now that judgment has not been implemented? That's the question that we should ask.
Okay, that's the question. But shout out to you, Asukwo. This is really, I don't know how you get to do it. Like we always say, you are a very creative mind. We need to sit in your mind for a day and see how you do it. Anyways, thank you so much, gentlemen. Yes. It was really good to sit with you to analyze the dailies this morning.
It's all good for a living.
I know, right? All right, this is all we can take for today. We're not done. Up next is Business Morning. Keep watching BDTV.